Welcome to Breathe California TV. Each week we run a show designed to educate you on environmental problems. We have, in our 30-year history, have often called this environmental concerns. Breathe California is the lung health organization for California, and many of the things that we do create environmental problems. Today, we're going to talk about how the environmental community gets involved in the political part of our lives. And I'm blessed to have an ace interviewer, Barbara Palmer, from Aptos in Santa Cruz County, trying to work me over to pry some information out of me. So watch this public service announcement, and we'll be back with Ms. Palmer in 30 seconds.
My name is Rene Montez. I've been using the CPAP machine, I would guess 10 years. I got so accustomed to it, I don't go anywhere without it. I take it with me everywhere. From the moment I put it on, I thought it was the greatest thing because the breathing was a lot easier, and after using it for a couple nights, I felt a lot of energy. Breathe California is fabulous.
Welcome back. This is Breathe California TV. We're the lung health organization for the state of California. Each year we help 100,000 people who have breathing difficulty, but we depend on you to be the volunteers to help us. I'm a volunteer. Barbara is a volunteer who's about to start asking me horrendous questions. And if you can help, just go to the website beneath our names or call 408-998-5865. So Barbara, did you have something you wanted to talk about?
Yes. I wanted to know more about the League of Conservation Voters. What is this organization and what are you trying to accomplish?
So for 52 years, we have developed an environmental movement. It started with various disasters that happened in the 70s. The big one in California was the Santa Barbara oil spill, but another one was a woman named Rachel Carson doing a book about how horrible DDT is for killing all forms of life. And that started the environmental movement in 1970. And there probably are 100 environmental organizations of significance. But it's hard for people to imagine our colleges and graduate schools did not have an environmental class when you and I got out of school. And that's back around 1970. One of the first organizations formed was called the League of Conservation Voters. They exist solely to influence the political process, just like there's a whole bunch of other organizations out there trying to raise money and support candidates they like. So there is a federal League of Conservation Voters that does federal elections. In Oakland, there is a California League of Conservation Voters, which does state elections. And the local League of Conservation Voters in Santa Clara County is licensed by the California League of Conservation Voters in Oakland. We only participate in local government elections. So we just finished doing our endorsements for the primary election in June of San Jose City Council candidates and county supervisors. They're the only ones we vote on in the primary election.
So you say you work on local government races. So is it only in, say, the Silicon Valley races that you're primarily working on, or other races in the state of California?
So there are about 12 chapters of the League of Conservation Voters in California, each operating in their county. We are prohibited from operating in any other county or endorsing in state or federal elections. But for the general election in November, we will be endorsing in about 13 cities besides San Jose, in addition to deciding who, if anybody, we want to support in runoff elections in San Jose. And then we have a number of special districts. We have 2 open space districts, and we have a water district who's been very big on shipping water from the Sacramento River system down south to San Joaquin farmers and as far south as San Diego. And that water use has been the biggest political history document in California, meaning it's the most significant political thing, the battles over water in California.
Now here in Santa Cruz, we've had issues over water that they're using really to put in around our coastline in order to protect us from the ocean, basically, because the water is rising in the ocean. So do we have a League of Conservation Voters here in Santa Cruz County?
So there's a wonderful former assemblyman named Fred Keeley, and he and I talked about it, but you're required to be a resident of the county to be on the board of directors. And so it would need to be 10 to 15 people. There's no reason that they couldn't do it for the whole Monterey Bay area and add in San Benito and Monterey County if they wanted to. It's just having people with guts to do it. Political organizations like the Democratic and Republican Party have no interest because they want to raise all the money for themselves. And they just have a focus on the candidates they choose to endorse. So it's worth noting the League of Conservation Voters in Santa Clara County is the only one that's an environmental organization that endorses. Your area has others called Save the Coast, and suspect there's more that get involved in making endorsements.
Now, when you examine the way a person has voted, so you're trying to make a decision whether or not you're going to endorse a candidate. Do you have a group of people or just a few individuals? I mean, how do you go about evaluating somebody so you know they're worthy of your endorsement?
So you started out as if you had written our questionnaire. We tell people, candidates when the filing deadline is typically the first week in March for the June election. And we try to have our questionnaires sent out the day or two that they file. It says right at the start, 85% of our decision is based on your track record. What have you done? Then our second question, besides telling us what you've done, is what's the most important issue in your town and what would you do about it? And the third question is, what else do you expect to come up in the 4 years or 2 years or 6 years, whatever term it is that you happen to have? But, you know, we've had people that have never run for office when all they can come up with is, gosh, I've been recycling, or I bought a hybrid. But ideally, if there were 2 or more candidates, we would pick the one who actually has a track record of experience. And you certainly can do that by being actively engaged in environmental organization. Our view is pretty broad. For example, we consider transportation and housing to be environmental issues.
Okay, so let's say you send out that questionnaire and you decide to endorse that candidate. Now they're running again, it's 2 or 4 years later. Do you go back and actually examine the track record of how they vote to make a decision again, whether or not to endorse the candidate? Or once you they have an endorsement, they're just endorsed?
So I just want to inject that after the questionnaire gets turned in, we decide to interview anybody that turned in a questionnaire, answered our questions. Follow-up is real critical, and it's why our board is made up of people that are active in environmental issues. Because we have no capability to fund a staff to go through and follow up on developing records on every one of the 20 or so jurisdictions that we endorse in. But the big jurisdictions like San Jose and the county will have on our board of 15 people, 4 or 5 familiar with every race. Mm-hmm. When you get to the smaller cities, for example, Monte Sereno has 3,500 people, and we've never endorsed a candidate there because we've only once had one that submitted it, and we didn't figure with 5 people running for 3 seats that we wanted to get involved with just one candidate with kind of an average record. We had nothing to compare it to.
So when you endorse, how do you put the word out that you have actually endorsed a candidate? And I guess let's back up a bit. How many people in your organization?
Well, our charter prohibits us from having members. The California League of Conservation Voters has 3,000 members in Santa Clara County who you might think they would let us know about it, but they don't, and I'm convinced the reason is they want to raise money for state and federal candidates, and they don't want us draining off money from them on local candidates. But we have an annual fundraiser each year that we put on in around the end of September to raise money. We will, for example, we gave everybody we endorsed in San Jose the maximum amount, which was $1,400 for mayor and $700 for city council. And the maximum allowed for the county supervisor was $1,000. So that was 8 people total. And then one way we get word out is what are called independent mailers. It is illegal, a crime where you can go to jail, to discuss an independent mailer with the candidate you're endorsing. They can't know about it. But a typical election will pick out 3 candidates that we think are particularly good. Good means not only that they're a quality candidate, but there might be a really poor candidate. We have a county supervisor seat where one of the candidates we think is wretched. So we would probably spend money on that candidate, on the good candidate in that race. You know, if you had 3 good candidates running, we're probably not going to be doing anything for an independent mailer because it isn't going to hurt which one gets elected. So we have a website that lists our candidates. It's SCCLCV.org. Our parent lists those candidates on their website, that being the California League of Conservation Voters. But it's a big problem. We're not as well known as the Sierra Club, which in the same area that we serve has 23,000 members. So virtually every one of San Jose's council districts may have 1,000 Sierra Club members. So That's probably 1,500 votes if they get out and let them know about it. We really have difficulties. We're having a big battle these days between, we used to send out mailers. Everybody got used to getting what seemed like tons of mail saying vote for XYZ or somebody. And we've decided that social media is more effective. And so whatever we do this year will all be sent out through Facebook or other similar kinds of services where you can buy ads from them. You just tell them what the zip code is and do that. But hopefully the Sierra Club will be very involved in the fall elections. They have worked very carefully with us in the past, but they didn't think anybody was really worth endorsing in the primary this year, which says how aggressive they are about wanting the greatest environmental candidates possible. I'm inclined to think politics is much more taking the time to make a comparison between good and okay and poor, or things that are in between.
So when you endorse a candidate, excuse me for interrupting, when you endorse a candidate, do you allow them to use your name in their mailings or their advertisements? Or do you have your name withheld?
They're allowed to use our name and they're allowed to use our logo. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a break for 30 seconds for another public service announcement by Breathe California. And then Barbara's got 10 more minutes to quiz me on what the heck it is we're doing.
The different therapeutic methods that we can help our very low socioeconomic status clients who have no alternatives, no anything, and there's still about 15 different resources we got out of this that if you have no resources, no service connection, you can still get aid.
That they are connected, one encourages the other, and that the process of change from backing off from the tobacco is the same as backing off from any other addictive drug.
Everyone can benefit from this training that we just were offered today. I would not take it back.
Welcome back. This is Environmental Concerns, sponsored by Breathe California. We're talking about the role of environmental groups in our political decisions. Breathe California is nonpartisan, so I'm not plugging any candidates here. But we've been talking about the only environmental organization endorsing in the primary in Santa Clara County, which is the League of Conservation Voters. And the quizzer here, you guys can't see it, but she's got a ball and chain. If she doesn't like my answer, she's going to slug me with, is Barbara Palmer.
Okay, my first question is, does the League of Conservation Voters partner with any other groups when you make your endorsements? I mean, do you sit down and really discuss with other groups? If so, what are those groups?
Well, I've been the endorsement chair for the local league for 30 years. And I was active also in the Sierra Club before starting this organization. And I invited them into our interviews. Generally, I would invite activists I knew, and they would go back to their organization and propose endorsements on people. We've had something of a falling out in the last 5 years over housing. League of Conservation Voters thinks the most significant environmental issue in our cities is housing. And that's because we have people, I serve on a government commission where Our administrative assistant drives every day from downtown Stockton, 3 hours one way. And the amount of air pollution that he's creating is pretty ungodly, as well as his lifestyle. And I'm just happy that he's never had any domestic problems, because it would be awful easy to be frustrated when you go home to your family and try to act level after you work an 8-day hour and you spend 14 hours to do it. So we view that as important, but Sierra Club is dominated by some NIMBYs who basically don't want any housing, don't want housing near them. So it's a definite issue that we've had.
So there is criteria. You must have criteria. When you just mentioned housing, which is very important in our area because the cost of housing is getting astronomical. So housing is an issue, and what other issues are important? I mean, I was thinking the League of Conservation Voters was more interested in just keeping the environment clean, but it seems like you've expanded beyond that. So what would be an example of a few questions that you might ask a candidate? Did they believe in something or not believe in something? Can you think of anything?
So, sure, let me go back and tell everybody who wants to hear the answer to that question to take a look at SCCLCV.org. We have 8 pages on our environmental principles on the website. I call it a cheat sheet for candidates. You may have a candidate with absolutely zero experience, but they look there, they compare it back, those as answers. But to specifically answer a question might be one that you would be surprised about, which is we ask people, what are they going to do about the homeless problems? Santa Clara County and your home in Santa Cruz have very significant homeless problems. Our Regional Water Quality Control Board for the Bay Area declared 68 creeks as polluted due to homeless. And if you think about it, if there's flooding or even high water where they live, which is often in creeks, it's all going down the creek, and that's untreated sewage. Pretty doggone significant problems. And there's just a whole bunch of other things that exist there where government can't provide service that are real important. Or the most important issue to Breathe California is, what are you going to do about air pollution? And that really does tie into the housing issue, or how you pump water around. Number of cities provide water to their residents, and 25 to 30% of the pollution in our state comes from diesel pumps that are used to pump water around. If you think about near your hometown of Tracy, there are 2 enormous sets of pumps, one state and one federal, that pump water to the San Joaquin Valley and then down to San Diego. And then every farmer along the way pumps water out with diesel pumps. And it's why the second most air polluted spot is not a spot that should be polluted, which is the San Joaquin Valley. Has horrible pollution due to all that diesel pumps. Anyhow, I went off on a tangent there, but you get the idea. So what else is up?
Well, you also said that you were not going to, this is not a program about endorsing candidates, but and you're dealing just with local candidates, not with state offices. Other groups are doing that. But my question is, we have a primary coming up here in June. Has your group endorsed candidates that are running for your local offices? And would you care to maybe mention a few and why you have endorsed those candidates?
So filing deadline was March 7th, roughly. And we interviewed candidates roughly March 26th and 7th. I'm not going to give you any names, but because candidates who run for higher office are often ones that ran successfully for local offices. Yesterday, I got a phone call from the League of Conservation Voters asking about people running in San Jose and Santa Cruz for the 28th Assembly District, which is newly 110,000 people in San Jose. And I suspect much of Campbell is in it, which is the other city that gets this show. So their track records were things that were important in what the state was deciding to do on endorsing for the state legislature. I can tell you that the only time that the federal made a decision that we talked to them was our first couple of years. They endorsed a moderate Republican who was running for Congress, and his opponent had 100% record as the state legislator, whereas the Republican was around 70%. And the Federal League of Conservation Voters endorsed the Republican to try to gain credibility with other Republicans who they thought they could influence, whereas the State League of Conservation endorsed the winner, who was Mike Honda, the Democrat with 100% record. So there's some very tough decisions that go into this. It's not just the candidates themselves, but it's also trying to figure out what's the best way to get their parties to do the right thing to protect our future.
So it sounds like you have a good line of communication at the different levels from the local. You're saying there are, I think you said 13 local League of Conservation Voters.
Right.
And they have a good line of communication with people that are with your group that that's dealing with state endorsements. So that's good that you have a line of communication open. That just seems like it's good for California if people were concerned about the environment as a major issue.
Well, I should add, because of what you said, as part of our endorsement process, we call up all the environmental groups and ask them what they think about the performance of the candidates. Other than us and the Sierra Club in Santa Clara County, nobody else has ever endorsed. But there's a land use organization called the Committee for Green Foothills. And the most important issue to local government voters is land use. And so that's real important for us to get to know. So I think I just got an order to stop here. Barbara, thank you very much for joining us. We've appreciated it. We'll sign you up as permanent interviewer if you want. And see us next week, Channel 15 Comcast in San Jose, 7 p.m.